Very good Sunday morning to you. I am Big Race Jim. You are watching Past the Wire TV, Sunday morning coffee, brought to you by our good friends at Shorebet Coffee and at Amwager. Good day at Aqueduct yesterday. Um, my brother and I were on McAfee, that five in the Peter Pan that just did not want to go by his stablemate, Captain Cook, allowing Hill Road to get the money in the last couple of jumps. So that was kind of crushing. You feel like you handicapped the race perfectly, and nevertheless, you're still a loser. Um, who's not a loser is Sovereignty. Right, big winner of the Kentucky Derby, skipping the Preakness, which is interesting, and that's kinda what I wanted to talk about today, just where does the Preakness stand in the current horse racing landscape? And I've got a good number of thoughts. Maybe they're good thoughts, maybe they're loser thoughts, who knows? We'll see. I'll let you guys be the judge in the comments. Um, so let's think about where the Preakness stands in in the grand scheme of things in horse racing, at least in the last couple of years, right? We know the history, 150 years running, and that's all positive, right? That's a good thing that they've kept this race going for forever. Um, Years past, though, probably a little bit more exciting than what we've seen over the last handful of years, where it's really been, a grade two at best, and a decent allowance race um, at worst. And of course, a lot of things. Time kind of tells us how a race is, right? Maybe the horses that are going to line up on Saturday all end up being Hall of Famers somehow, and we'll look back and we'll say, "Wow, that Preakness in 2025 was, had all of these great horses." But right now, the field seems a little bit meh, and that's okay. We'll still handicap it. We'll still make a pick, and everything will be fun. But I think every year at this time we have the annual debate of, should we change the Triple Crown, and should these horses that win the Derby, should they automatically run in the Preakness? And well, then you have the people that say, well, if they bred horses for durability rather than just pure, speed and brilliance over a couple of furlongs, then we wouldn't be in this problem. And maybe that's true. To me, that's like, I don't know. The people who say that is super frustrating to me, because it's just, I feel like they're just trying to have these like big brain thoughts, like going against the grain. And I don't know. Those comments always just seem too high and mighty to me. And maybe that's true, but I think that speaks to a little bit of a larger issue, where there there's the whole horse racing industry, as a complete circle, but it just speaks to just kind of how disjointed and how different the industry is, under that thoroughbred racing umbrella is, right? Racing is its own separate thing. Breeding is its own separate thing. The two things don't really work together, in terms of like cooperation and collaboration. So when people say, "Oh, we need to breed for durability," like, okay, but that's not like a next year thing, right? That probably takes you know, half a decade or more to start breeding for durability. And that's not where the money is right now. So the breeders aren't going to do it, like, right? So that's why I get frustrated when people say, we wouldn't have this problem if the breeding industry. Well, it's its own industry and they can do what they want. So let's figure out how we can, kind of bring the Preakness back to life within the current landscape and how things are working. And I think personally, I think the Preakness and first racing, they're on their way out, so I don't expect them to do anything, or maybe that's one last thing they do before they turn the lights out in the next year or two in their um, Maryland influence. But I think right now the Preakness needs to move. Maryland racing, the long acronym, the MTROA, um, they need to move it. They need to move the Preakness to 4th of July weekend. It can't stay where it is and be successful. We haven't seen it be successful in the last couple of years. Overall, handle's been down. It did uptick a bit last year, so 24 compared to 23, it did rise a little bit. Um, the Preakness future bet is a pretty neat thing, and that's been going kind of well for them from a wagering standpoint. But overall, the race needs to move, and I think it needs to go. Um, the only spot it could really go would be after the Belmont, right? Like, why would Naira want to move the Belmont around? It is in the perfect spot on the calendar. Usually that first Saturday in June, um, right after the Derby. Like, that is the perfect 4 or 5 weeks after the Derby to get people, um, to get horses from the Derby into the Belmont. They're not moving. And again, going back to just how disjointed this whole industry is, unfortunately, they have they have no reason to move. They're not being forced to move, and they're in a perfect spot on the calendar, so why would they move? And I think the Triple Crown is only as strong as its weakest link, and its weakest link right now, and its weakest link that has been the weakest link for a really long time, is the Preakness. And I think the Preakness needs to move, right? The industry can't tell Pimlico and the MTROA and whoever else is running Maryland racing. They can't tell them to move, right? There's no precedent for that. There's no legal justification for that. Pimlico and Maryland has to move it on its own. And I think now's the time to do it. And it's not either like we want to see a triple crown. Like, I, I couldn't care less about a triple crown. Like, yeah, it's fun, it's cool. People get excited. People who don't follow racing or talk about racing, they get excited for a couple of weeks, and then they pay attention for one extra day, and then they go away. Right? It's not like we've seen 2 Triple Crown winners in the last 10 years, and racing is worse off, right, than it was 10 years ago. So it's not like a Triple Crown winner or even a Triple Crown bid is this sort of saving grace. It's not, and we know it's not. So I'm coming at it from a standpoint of competitive racing, higher handle, right? Like the takeout rates at Pimlico are actually like pretty good, but the cards are usually pretty mid. And this Preakness is shaping up to be, at least right now, kind of bland. And I think if Pimlico and the MTROA moved it to 4th of July weekend, I think that they would find a little bit more success in filling the starting gate and getting some top horses to compete in there. I saw some conversations on Twitter, maybe it was between my brother and my dad and I, and we were talking about journalism still sitting on the fence of whether or not to go to the Preakness, and um, just kind of thinking like maybe they're just waiting to see who else goes in to see if it's an easy sort of grade one that they could pick up. And of course anything can happen. Nothing is nothing is a sure thing. But honestly, I'd be disappointed if he went to the Preakness. I'd much rather see him fresh and ready to go in the Belmont up against Baeza again, up against Sovereignty again. And that to me would be, from just a pure fan standpoint, that would be more exciting than seeing him, wheel back on 2 weeks rest and land in the Preakness where he would certainly be the favorite. Um, so my opinion on that whole thing, it's not that the Triple Crown needs to like be adjusted or whatever. Um, I just think that the Preakness needs to move the race for the long term, at least the short term, and perhaps even the long term health of that particular race and that particular day of racing. Um, it just hasn't been good. It hasn't been super competitive. Um, I think the only people that get excited about the Preakness lately are the people at the concert in the infield, and they have no idea what is happening with the races. So that's my 2 cents on it. Move the Preakness. Move the Preakness to July. Somewhere else on the calendar. But July probably makes the most sense. 4th of July weekend. But at that point too, you're competing against other other big races um, for a lot of those horses. I don't know. It just feels like the Preakness is in no man's land, um, based on how racing is currently structured, and trainers not wanting to run their horses back on short rest. And when horses only have like 5, 6 races in them, you know, blowing through, 2 bullets essentially in the span of 2 weeks after the rigors of getting to the Kentucky Derby, um, just doesn't seem wise. And again, as I'm talking about this, that easy layup, low hanging fruit argument is like, well, just change the breeding. Okay, but what are we going to do for the next 10 years as we change the breeding, which the breeding industry has made no indication that they're interested in doing? What are we going to do? We're just going to let the Preakness just sit there and be an afterthought, and maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's fine. But from a fan standpoint, from a wagering standpoint, the cards have been pretty lackluster the last couple years. I'm not so like nostalgic about having the Triple Crown run, 3 races in 5 weeks, like, yeah, it's difficult, and they can't do it, which is fine, right? Which is fine. We can That's it. Uh, maybe that is the maybe that is because the Triple Crown is hard, and we don't wanna see a Triple Crown every year. I get that. Um, but at the same time, for the long-term health of Maryland racing, I think it needs to move. I think it needs to move to after the Belmont, um, just so it can be a bit more competitive, increase the wagering, and perhaps get people through the casuals from June into July, maybe a little bit before Saratoga opens up. I don't know. I don't remember the tweet exactly, but it was after the Derby that Commissioner Rapoli put out on how to structure the racing calendar, and I thought that was genius. I agreed with everything that he said in there. I don't have the link, but I'm sure we all saw it. But I thought that was super smart, and I'd be completely on board with with that sort of racing calendar and structure. And another thing too, like, I mean, we all have our opinions, right? But these, like, and I agree with a lot of them, right? I think for the long-term health of, perhaps the breeding industry, they should, breed for durability. Like, I agree with that, but that's not the case right now. So rather than waiting around to try and force the breeding industry's hand, like, what can we do um, with the way things are currently to make it better? Um, Same thing with, like, all of these derby preps. Like, none of these derby preps should be grade ones. I agree with that. In theory, I agree with that. And that seems like it could be like a relatively simple thing. But again, like, who's going to sign off on that? Right? Like, how many horses do we see win a grade one, like the Arkansas Derby and Sandman? There you go. And then they're just, wildly overbet in the Derby. The horse finished the fine seventh, but he's gonna land in the Preakness, and I don't know, probably be wildly overbet there too. And we would be taking a grade one away from the owner, the trainer, the jockey, and then the eventual, breeders. So maybe that's I don't know, maybe that's an avenue where the racing side can kind of force the breeding side. But, you know, I don't know. It seems like they're only downgrading a lot of races at Naira, it seems. But anyway, interesting enough. We'll see what happens there. Probably nothing. But we'll take a quick time out. We'll come back, and I want to talk about this influencer stuff with Sandman, and I'll just kind of give a couple of thoughts on the Preakness before we close it out. But move the Preakness. That's the only way. Move the Preakness. Maryland needs to move the Preakness to July 4th weekend. in Sunday morning coffee, past the wire TV, big race gym, shore bet coffee, am wager, Pleasant Acres stallions. They've got a lot of good stallions. Like these horses that come off the track. Like I was a big fan of Verifying. I'm pretty sure I liked him in the Derby that year as like a board hitter. But anyway, glad you're with us. Just kind of riffing on a Sunday morning about the Preakness, and it's got to get out of this, mid-May, early to mid-May, 2 weeks after the Derby spot. I think it's just the current landscape of racing. That spot is just absolutely brutal, and it's got to get out of there. Um, the other big topic the last week has been last 2 weeks, last week, um, the influencers around horse racing. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. I am pro influencer. I think we need the sport needs one influencer, 10, yeah, 10 influencers. I'm pro influencer. But I do think that there are some early missteps, maybe. And I don't know if it's missteps um, on the part of the influencer, or just the um, self-proclaimed degenerates on horse racing Twitter. But sitting there reading all of these tweets and seeing the I forget his name even, the influencer that's tied to Sandman and West Point Thoroughbreds and all that. Just seeing him post his content and diving in on Twitter, like kudos to him. Horse racing Twitter can be a pretty wild space on the internet. But he dove right in and was going back and forth with a lot of the old guard of horse racing Twitter. So good for him. Um, and I agree with a lot of what he said. Like we need to generate more fans and younger fans, right? Like, um, no disrespect, no disrespect to the rest of the past the wire team, but it's always kind of humorous to me when I'm talking with John and Gio and Eddie C and Charles, and I'm obviously the youngest one of the bunch, and you don't really see many people younger than me kind of following the races consistently. And at a certain point, that's going to be a major problem. We've seen handle decline and decline and decline and decline, right? Regardless of what the tracks will tell you about, record Kentucky Derby handle. Okay. Well, what happened this next Sunday? How was the Sunday after the Derby? What was that handle compared to um, the Sunday after the Derby 2024? We'll never know because they don't want you to know, right? We're not dumb. So horse racing needs younger fans to come in to, excuse me, to come in to help continue to supply the handle. And how do we do that? We probably need like a solid marketing campaign, like some of the stuff that um, America's Best Racing does. And again, horse racing Twitter will lead you to believe, and I think they have some valid points for sure, that It's the gambling that needs to be paid attention to first, rather than trying to bring people in for the fan aspect, the lifestyle aspect, and then see if that translates to betting. All right, it's like the old classic chicken or the egg sort of thing. Me personally, I think if we educated people on how gambling works, how betting works in the racing industry, I think that might may have permanently turn them off. Um, but they also might feel empowered to make smarter decisions. Um, and and then that sort of, maybe early success, cashing a couple of tickets in the early goings, kind of provides them that desire to want to learn more, to want to do more, want to wager more, and be part of the sport more. Um, where I think the influencer is right is that nobody's on Twitter, at least the younger generation. Like, they don't participate on Twitter whatsoever, and that's fine. So he was putting out content on TikTok, I think, Snapchat, um, two platforms that, while I'm the youngest of the Past the Wire group, I'm still too old to be on on TikTok and Snapchat. But that's where that next generation of fan is. So I think that's where horse racing needs to be. And I don't I would imagine that this influencer knows that generation and knows how to communicate with that generation, obviously, right? He's got a huge following, and he wouldn't be an influencer if he didn't know how to communicate and get on the same level as his audience. So I trust him in that regard. Um, I think, though, more emphasis needs to be placed on the gambling side of it. And I also think that there needs to be some, um, I don't know, maybe respect isn't the right word, but I do think that there needs to be some sort of appreciation given to the the degenerates on horse racing Twitter. And I say that as a term of endearment because that's what a lot of that group refer to them as, in a positive way, right? And I feel like when you interact with these people that you meet on Twitter, and you're sharing handicapping advice, and everybody's kind of criticizing each other and cursing each other off and whatever else, but when you're around each other physically at the track, standing next to each other, like, all of these people are very kind and knowledgeable and helpful and want to see this game thrive and succeed. And I've had the opportunity to meet plenty of them, whether it's at the Breeders' Cup, the Kentucky Derby, Saratoga, wherever. And even the people that have told me to go pound sand on the internet are shaking hands and hugging and catching up like we've known each other forever. And I think there needs to be any influencing campaign needs to find a way to that capture that sort of the old guard, the camaraderie of the old guard. And because they've seen this game deteriorate right in front of their eyes for the last, whatever, 30 years, 40 years. And they're digging their heels in, right? And they don't want to see it go away. And I feel like there needs to be, in any sort of marketing campaign, there needs to be an appreciation for that and those people and the old guard of horse racing Twitter. And I feel like that was a misstep um on the part of the recent influencer campaign, we'll call it. Um, that can't be left out. because that is a huge part of horse racing. And I feel like when you leave that out, you leave out the gambling side of it, and that's going to be at the detriment. The other thing that I was a little frustrated with is like, you know, wealthy influencer, young guy, just gets involved, but is like automatically at the top of the sport, right? Like you're in on a Kentucky Derby contender, right? Like would they send them off at second choice, third choice? Like you are the 0.1% of the 1%. So, and that's great. Like that would be awesome, right? Like I'd love to be in that position, and maybe one day I will be. But to just have your entry into the sport over the last couple of months just be on the Kentucky Derby Trail, I think is um, not what's the right word or phrase. It's just like unrealistic. So, in seeing some of the comments going back and forth on Twitter, right? Again, different platform than where his main audience is. Um, but just seeing some of the comments, it's like you're at the top already and you're interacting with people who have been, trying their best to, hang out in the middle. So, like from a communication standpoint, like that was a little like made me wince a little bit, like coming from a good place, but I think when you get to the top like that, like instantly, there's a lot of learning along the way that like those steps got skipped and you just become a little bit less credible and a little bit less believable when you're at the top immediately, and then trying to tell the rest of the industry the way things ought to be. And it's like, well, not really. So overall, I'm pro influencer. Get all the kids on, obviously 18 and over, gambling legally. Get all the kids on young adults on Snapchat and TikTok and bring them in. Bring them in. Show them what you know. Show them your side of it. That's fine. But we cannot try to build fans and then try to build the gambling. It either needs to be build the gambling and then have the gambling turn them into fans, or simultaneously doing both, building fans while also educating and building the gambling. We can't do fans before gambling. At the very least, they need to be doing that at the same time. Um, and I think that some of the comments were a little bit misguided, just given the overall lack of understanding and experience in the what the true part of racing is. And I think Ryan from Counterpoint Thoroughbreds on Twitter had like a great thread about it, just kind of explaining that point. I thought that was pretty genius, right? Like most of the industry is trying to get their horse ready to run at Belterra um, you know to keep the operation going, and it's not being involved in a derby horse that's going to get sent off at second or third choice and have no shot because the Arkansas Derby was not a good race, and that pace meltdown set everything up for Sandman, right? um, and also there needs to be an appreciation and an understanding of horse racing Twitter and the old guard and the degenerates of horse racing Twitter. And I say that again as a term of endearment, um, because those are some really really special people. And I think when you ignore them, as we've seen, people tend to get a little upset and more opinionated than they already are. And I think any marketing and influencing campaign needs to include them and appreciate them and find ways to work with them, because otherwise we just see, a lot of screaming and yelling and keyboard warrioring and finger pointing and whatnot. So that's my 2 cents in the last sip. Sunday morning coffee, past the wire TV, presented by our great friends at Shorebet Coffee, Amwager, and Pleasant Acres. Um, I am Big Race Jim. Thanks again for watching, as always, and we'll see you next week.
Go. It's simplification and Javier